The second rule is the fake safe. So it is probably of the highest importance when you're not home to have a fake safe. Now, fake, I mean that is a cheap safe that is usually accessible or removable, maybe with a little bit of force. It's kind of a bait safe that smash and grabbers can find. Hi everyone, today we're answering question number 5 about storage for physical metals. So here's a question on the private Telegram member chat, which is only available if you're a Buy Me a Coffee member or you are a Patreon member. So actually we're going to provide a public video, which is this, and then we're going to provide a member only video for them, which is going to be having a little bit more details on exact services and that sort of stuff. And the question goes, what attributes do you look for when vetting a storage location for physical metals? Also security, alarms, guard oversight, lead backing, showing access, thick walls, doors, that type of stuff, time delay. Also visibility, obscurity, bank vault versus late night gardening, jurisdiction, political risk or confiscation, cross-border movements, how many jurisdictions, and knowledge and loss prevention. To avoid loss due to ultimate death, the amount of location and assets need to be communicated. How do you avoid compromising the location as a result? If obscure locations, how to prevent accidental loss due to sale or disposal of a storage location. Any other attributes that you should be thinking of. So let's just start with the thing is that whatever was exposed, as in knowledge that you have, is no longer safe. So ideally the purchases should be made with cash locally, and that way no one really knows, and you need to shut up about it. So that is pretty much the first step where you need to think about, in the sense that the storage starts with knowledge of the storage and who knows what, including banks and all of that stuff. The second thing is that if that was not the case, then you can quote unquote sell it into the market and ship it out of the country, or rather yet repurchase it in a different country. That is one of my go-to strategies, is to move at least into different jurisdictions and different countries, and ideally countries that don't have the history of confiscation or forced selling and that sort of stuff. So that can happen. It has happened in the past. I would say the odds are pretty low, but nonetheless they are there. The other thing I would mention, that when it comes to higher value, right, usually those are not barterable items anyway. So like ounces of gold or anything like that, or even 1/10 ounce of gold is not really barterable. So in that sense, you well, it's up to you, but it doesn't really make sense to have it on you or have it in the place where you live. Now you still want security for the place where you live, but that's for personal security, not necessarily for storing value. What you should be storing is barterable items, up to 29 pieces of silver, and I have a philosophical reason for that, right? Because the Lord and Savior were sold out for 30 pieces of silver. So you would have to think that you're really important if you want to keep more than that in your house. So for barterable reasons, I do sometimes can have up to 29 pieces of silver where I am, but usually not even that. So then it comes to vault, bank, or deposit boxes, or midnight gardening. So I can't tell you what to do. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not going to tell you what to do. All I'm going to say is that if it's in a bank, the bank controls it. You don't really own it. You have a piece of paper that tells that you have something in there. Most of the times it's not even insured. The vaults are not even insured. The deposit box are not even insured. And the federal people have raided vaults in even Beverly Hills if you go back and look at the news. So it's up to you. I don't think that you need to fear too much of it if you diversify enough, and you have to have something where you can get to it, you know, and you really are trading physical stuff. I'm not sure why you would do that, but if you need to store that for some reason, having 1 or 2 ounces of gold that you are okay in case of losing it, in case of something major happens, is probably okay. Now, when it comes to multi-generational wealth, it's going to be hard because the crazier you are is usually the better you are in thinking ahead. So I'm not going to say to anyone, bury your gold, but all I'm going to say is historically, and even from very stories that I know, that I've heard, relatives or very close relatives to my grandmother, the only way how they were able to save some of that wealth through communism was that they actually buried it, and they fled the country during communism. Before communism, the family members, as in the great the great grandfather left the gold in Romania, then they escaped to Austria. Then when they came back after '89, they dug it up and they found it, and they opened a line of business out of that. So it's a very famous story, not very well known outside, but in our family it is known that has happened, and they're running great, businesses out of that money, and nobody thought it would have worked, but it works. So multi-generational wealth can be stored like that. Of course, you would need to know how to do it, where to do it. Things change, especially things change when it comes to 20 years. If you look at the houses how they are built in the US, I'm not even sure they last that, So usually what people do in these cases, I've heard that they use something like national forests or something where building permits are not given, right? And of course they need to know a trail that they use a lot and they know well. And usually off of that trail, there's something like physical items from where they can identify things, and that can be written down. So it's like crazy because this is, stuff for the movies, but what can you say, right? It worked in the past. I love those stories when, we find, Roman gold or something like that was hidden somewhere, and then people find it. The problem with that, of course, is accessibility. So you do want to access it during or the very late stage of hyperinflation, where things have been normalized and the new system is kicking into place, and you want to be able to use that gold for down payment or to take a loan against. And you need to bring it into the bank. They take a hold of it, and you get a certain amount of cash for it in the new currency, and then you can use that for down payment, or usually just fully pay out a new house, right? So you do want that type of access, but you don't need to have immediate access. So when it comes to access, I differentiate between 3 types of access. One for immediate barter or cash. Usually that's going to be somewhere around your salary. That can be easily accessed, and by easily meaning maybe less than half an hour to an hour. Then the second piece is somewhere that is on the perimeter or outside the perimeter, but not easily accessible. And for not easily accessible, meaning that it takes even you more than 1 hour or 3 hours to get. And that's usually just for safety reasons, because that is something that you can't even get if they force you to, right, below a certain period of time. So that would be second, and the third is the one that we just talked about, that could be in a different country. Now, some Asian countries, and I'm going to go in more detail in the private video, but basically some Asian countries have done very well when it comes to, freedom. Recently in banking freedom, used to be Switzerland was very good, but if you are a US citizen, it's very hard for you to utilize these systems without the knowledge of the US government, and actually you do have to report on them. So depending on where your sister lives, right, or where your brother lives, they may be able to use those systems and help you out, is what I'm saying. So for instance, you don't necessarily have to buy gold in the United States, but you can just have a vacation somewhere. And this is, again, movie level stuff, but like, it works. So you have a vacation somewhere, you purchase the gold there. Budapest happens to be a really good place where you can purchase gold, and as long as you are a Hungarian citizen, then there's certain taxes that you don't have to pay for investment gold and all of that stuff. So there are more details in here that I'm not going to go into the public videos, but there are certain paths that you can take completely legal within the legal framework that all you're really doing is obfuscating, so more governments don't know about what you're doing, or each government knows one piece of the pie, but no one knows but you the full piece of the pie. So you have to be creative. The Wolf of Wall Street comes to my mind, like that movie. But really, it's like all within legality. Traveling with gold is, you can, we have done it. I've asked multiple times. Well, I'm not going to reveal, but basically we travel a lot, and as long as it is less than $10,000, you can go very easily and freely. Even if it's above $10,000, you could. However, then depending on the country, I know Hungary, you do need to report it, and you will have to pay VAT, VAT tax and other stuff. But usually, if it's the value, cash and whatever coins you have, is less than $10,000, it's fairly easily movable. So now if you're taking a different plane, then your mother-in-law is taking, then into your separate family, now you can move even more. And maybe your father-in-law travels separate again 3 days later, and now you're so there's ways how to do around it, but it's really a team effort. And honestly, I don't know, maybe some of you have a lot, so you need to plan out more. The other thing that I will mention, even in this video, was that I used to think that the Perth Mint Gold certificate was really good. I still think it is. So that is actually paper gold, but it is backed by a mint that can actually produce the gold, unlike other paper golds, right? Which, like the comics and all that stuff. So the GLD, which is also paper gold. So it's somewhat at least backed by physical things. And that's also just a piece of paper and a registration for you. But if you actually go to Australia, you'll be able to get the gold out in physical form. So that is almost as good as gold. I used to think that. I still think that. However, since the cerveza sickness, as some people say, the flu, since the big flu epidemic, Australia has really shown their ugly side. So I don't know what to think about the Australian government anymore. Well, actually I do. I know exactly what to think about them. It's just not here to share. But anyway, so there are other really good certificates of gold that you can travel with. I'm not recommending, again, anything, but there are ways that you used to be able to move assets and gold or gold related assets. There's even a gold related cryptocurrency. Again, consult with your investment advisor. So it is supposed to be backed, but it's really, as I see it, as a temporary holding. So in case you want an immediate exposure for gold price movements, but you're probably gonna sell it again back into the market and use the same amount to actually purchase physical gold for the long term, then that is possible. Right, so there are definitely options out there. I know goldandsilver.com offers storage locations and multiple storage locations. That's Mike Maloney's company. So there are definitely options out there, but you really have to know about risks. And in this case, I do have to say diversifying is probably a good thing, because you never know which government goes crazy. You never know what is the country you cannot go back to anymore, and you never know what happens, right? So political risk is definitely a big issue. Some Asian countries and some European countries like Switzerland have good deals on them. However, usually the deals are better if you are not a US citizen, because ever since Obama the rules have changed and they do need to report on you if you are a US citizen. If you're not US citizen, then it's somewhat easier for you, because then you can only lock that information into the country where you're storing it. So that is good. That is why it's good to have very close relatives who are not US citizens, or people who you absolutely trust, or you actually pay them. Right now, that may be illegal. I don't know. Check with your lawyers. Great. So, cross-border movement, we talked about how many jurisdictions. I would say at least three, because we are living in a multipolar world. So if you have something in Russia, they're most likely not going to give it out to the United States, and they might take a bigger cut though. And so on. So if you have some Asian countries or European countries, again, I would say at least 3 parts of the world would be enough for jurisdiction wise. But again, it's really just what people know. And I think that time is safety, in the sense that you should not be able to have immediate access to anything if you are planning it as a long-term or very long-term solution. Right, so 2 more things to touch here. One was, okay, so where do you store barterable value items? And by this I mean wedding rings, for instance. So I have said that having multiple sets of actual wedding rings that you can use for barter, even silver rings, 924 silver rings, can be used for that, right? And it's actually much safer in an SHTF situation, because you can always pretend that it's your own actual wedding ring, and you walk in there without rings and, with the ring in your hand, and just say, okay, what can I get for this, or a chain or something like that. Also, silver has, you never know what the communists did in China, but it's very rare that the silver got confiscated. So now that may not be investment silver, but if you have, as I said, sterling silver pieces, that is really good, very easily recognizable, easily provable. 925 silver can be bartered easily. So if you have that kind of stuff, and up to a certain point where it doesn't have a risk storing it, like a major risk, but you still want to store it in a safe place, then I have 4 rules for that. And I think the very first thing you have to have is, not even for the valuables that you have, but for your own life and the life of your loved ones, to be able to have opportunities for early detection. So one of the best things is, of course, perimeter defense, as in movement tracking outside of the house. That includes dogs, right, and all that stuff. Now within that, your very first defense is going to be window break detection. You can go with very simple ones like Simply Safe or something like that. They all sell this, or Ring. So you want to make sure you have protection for breaking windows. Then of course all of your entry points and movement detectors. So if all of that is set up, all that gives you is time. And I showed how I demoed like one of my favorite fast access gun boxes, and that should be in every room if you can have it, or at least 2 places in the house. And every adult needs to have training in how to handle firearms, and potentially as soon as the kids reach that age, them as well. Now they may not need to have immediate access for it, so it depends on the ages and so on. However, make sure you have protection and training, and it's very important for you and your neighbors to be in constant communication and have an unwritten or even written pact on how you're going to protect each other. That is probably the most important thing. So luckily we have that, and we have neighbors you would not believe. But anyway, so going back, right, then that's the first rule. The second rule is the fake safe. So it is probably of the highest importance when you're not home to have a fake safe. Now, fake, I mean that is a cheap safe that is usually accessible or removable, maybe with a little bit of force. It's kind of a bait safe that smash and grabbers can find. So usually master bedroom closets, which is like the worst place to hide stuff, but usually that's where people hide stuff. So you would have that fake safe in there, and maybe bolted down or just like with a wire, but if they really pull on it, it comes out, and then they can run off with that. And usually, you know, they had to spend some time with it to take the whole safe as is. And then you can have some fake checks in there or expired checks, and you can buy fake gold on eBay and that sort of stuff. So I think that is probably the most important thing out of them all, even if you don't even have anything else in the house. Because as soon as the alarm goes off and you have that fake safe, they're not going to spend too much time on looking for other safes or anything like that. So make sure that they can find that and they run off within the 4 to 8 minutes until, you know, the police or your neighbors can respond. And if you're not home, if you're home, then just take care of it. Anyway, so the other thing is to have, if beyond that, there's 2 more safes that I would recommend to have. It's, you know, you're gonna spend some money on it. The second one is an actual hidden safe that you can access. It does actually have some valuables in it, and that reason for that is it really comes from movies. But what you need to think about, what happens if you are forced to open a safe, whether government or non-government entity forces you to open the safe, and you have to pretend that there is, well, not pretend, it actually has to have some value that they can take. However, that may not be all the value, right? But that's all the value that you have in paper, and that is the value that they could also probably track through purchases and that sort of stuff, through banks or maybe cards or anything like that. So that is your legally available value that you have. It's an actual safe. It's hidden somewhere, like a wall safe is usually good, behind something. And definitely use other locations. So be creative, and you really need to be creative, and hiding in plain sight behind something is usually much better than the usual suspects of closet somewhere. And the third safe needs to be your actual safe at home. And I'm not even talking about gun safe. So this is the third safe. Yes, the third safe. You may or may not need this, and this is where you would have those 29 pieces of silver and that sort of stuff for bartering, and maybe extra ammo or guns just in case, right? If you actually need to open it and have a fast access to that. So that would usually be something like a floor safe, and it needs to be behind 3 things. So that means what is 3 things? So for instance, you have a piano. Below the piano you have the rug. Below the rug you have a fake floor that you open, and then you access the floor safe. So, you know, and maybe the actual valuables are in the piano. So you really need to be creative. But usually if it's harder to get to and it's behind 3 levels, they're not going to be able to find that in a smash and grab, right? So yeah, so the first one is the fake safe, the second is the plausible deniability safe, and the third one is the some valuables that you actually may be able to barter in a future scenario. I would say only that third one should have a pistol in it, but you also have to have fast access gun boxes, and maybe if you're a gun enthusiast, then also a separate gun safe, but there should be no valuables in that one. So, right, and this is, again, not storing your family long-term valuables that you're going to use after hyperinflation. For that, we talked about that needs to be completely separate, and you don't have access to that. And good. So yeah, the other thing is that you need to think about is untimely death and location, and how to have to be communicated with others. So I am a software engineer, among many other things. And usually what we do when it comes to encrypting something, one of the best ways is to have a public key and a private key. So, and usually that means the key itself is broken into 2 pieces and you store it in 2 different places. So for instance, let me talk about this in this way. So the actual code of what you're storing and where it is let's say a geolocation somewhere, and that may be actual coordinates, or that may be, and this is way better, if you, what the secret is that you're encrypting, right, is, for instance, the stuff is hidden, stuff, not like X amount of this and X amount of that. The stuff is hidden at the tree where we used to play when you were 4. So that is the secret, right? So that by itself, even if somebody gets that, is very personal. They don't even know what to think about, right? So like if you even store that in a safe, in a vault, it's probably safe until they actually, you spend a lot of time to figure out where that tree is, right? So if the vault was opened and they get this message, then you know, the government can't really find it out, and it may be a tree at a park, a national park or something like that, and you need to create memories. You need to think 20 years ahead, right? And you just talk about that tree for the kids a lot, and you come back and visit the tree, but then suddenly they get a message that, hey, there's actually valuable under that tree. So, right, it's, you need to think about that. Or remember that time when I took you home to Romania and we visited your grandparents' house. Remember the well, right? It's like, you need to think about these things. So that is, even if it's accessed, it's very personal and it takes time. So that means if the secret was leaked, you personally can get to there faster than the other party and maybe change it and then store a new message. So that's the actual key that you're gonna encrypt. That's the actual secret that you're gonna encrypt. Now the encryption needs to be in 2 places. So that message that gets encrypted, usually it gets torn either into 2 pieces. Then one could be in the place where maybe with your lawyer who writes your will, and could be actually just accessed once, you know, the will is presented. But then the actual decryption key, the secret key, is only available in your safe. So for instance, your lawyer doesn't have access to your safe, your relatives have access to the safe, but the other piece of the code your lawyer has, right? So it's like 2 things need to come together in order to solve the mystery. And even the mystery is something, like I said, only makes sense for the actual people you want to have access to that stuff. So you need to break things into 2 and store into 2 pieces. So actually I'm going to talk more about this in the future, how like I use very simple encryption to do this, because I think people need to know, and it's not like a big secret, and usually just using a very simple cipher can be used for this. So you can just like even give the whole secret sentence to anyone and they don't even know what there is, but your children or your relatives will know, oh yeah, grandpa with his crazy encryption stuff, and they exactly know where the decryptor is in your safe once they have access to that. But if somebody got access to your safe, all they have is the decryption key to what? They don't even know. So making sure storing it in 2 different places, right? And then ideally, if you can plan it out, then you have multiple locations, multiple secrets, and multiple keys, and one for each relative that you want to leave stuff for. So I know it's a lot, but I mean, you can plan it out. It's actually fun if you think about it. I used to think about this ever since I was a child, right? So because I heard a lot of stories that, you know, what my grandfather needed to hide from the communists, what my father needed to hide from the communists. So I mean, this was my life. But anyway, more details on that if you're interested, and more details on actual, well, you know, institutions, if you really care about that eventually. But I would really like to know in probably an anonymous forum that we're most likely going to do, not on the Telegram chat, because Telegram is compromised in the sense they know who you are. Maybe that used to be not the case, but now it is, ever since the guy got arrested in France. So maybe I'll set up an anonymous forum where we can share tips, right? But again, I never share the actual my stuff, right? I'm only like, okay, what else could be work for others, right? And only talk about that. Never actually talk about like, oh, and by the way, this is again something that I wanted to say. There is safety in secrecy, in the sense a gold bar hidden in 3 layers of Ziploc bags in an old can of paint dropped into the paint is probably much safer than a gold bar in a safe, if people know that you have a safe. So is what I'm saying, that, and that now that's public knowledge. I don't keep it there, right? But you can't, because nobody knows that you talked about that. So, you know, you can store things in, quote unquote, almost available locations. If nobody knows about it and it's very creative, then you can have that. So, and there's plenty of space. Like, you can take a can of spray paint. Well, I don't know why this is a jar, but you can take a can of spray paint and you can put the bottom of the spray paint on a sander and just sand the edges, and then the spray paint the bottom will fall off, and you clean it out and you can put it back with magnets, and you know, this glittery weird paint that nobody ever uses, and you put it right back into the paint where you keep all the rest of the spray paints, and it could be full of silver, and it's way safer than an actual safe that you have, because nobody knows. The only problem with that, and this is a serious true problem, is that your wife might throw it out because if they don't know, right? If they know, it's a way safer place to store even cash in the house. So as long as you trust the people in the house and you know they won't throw it away, then you can be really, really creative to the point where no one will actually find anything. And it's really stupidly easy, but you have to be creative. So that's why I'm talking about that. Okay, we can come up with this if we want to have fun on an anonymous forum that I might set up on startpathacademy.com in the future. I don't have it yet, but we can share ideas for fun. And again, if you're doing something, never share that. But you can play with other stuff where you used to store something in the past and now you share it because you don't want to use that thing anymore. So you can get really creative. But again, whatever valuables you have, they should not be in your house for long term, unless, you know, it's something minuscule and you're okay with losing it or presenting it to a government entity eventually. So keep it safe, keep it legal. There's so many creative ways. You don't need to worry too much about it. But it's actually a really fun or creative process for me. And I'm going to talk more about ciphering stuff in the future if you guys are interested. I even developed a chess cipher, which is not perfect by all means, but you can actually just store chess moves, and that is actually a secret code for something else. So there's like other ways and means, but usually a very simple cipher is really good as long as the message is not long and it's not repeating a lot of words and common words, and the letters are not repeated. So ciphers are really, really good to encrypt stuff if they don't even know that it's encrypted or what's encrypted, and you're not using common words like gold or something like that. But if you're using the treasure is here, right, and you misspell the treasure, then it's really hard even for computers to find, you know, crack that. Or maybe you just write in a different language, right? Like the Americans used to do in encoding stuff in the Second World War, right? When they used the Cherokee Indians to write messages. So it was hard to decode because it wasn't even English. So you can get so creative that nobody will ever find out anything. And it's like one of the most fun things to me. But again, you know, your own safety and your own peace of mind, and then knowing that you're gonna end up naked in front of God eventually anyway, so you're gonna leave all that stuff behind, and you I don't know if you're gonna be naked, but all I'm saying, you're not gonna bring all the treasures into the next life, so don't worry about them too much, in the sense that they don't need to be with you all the time. As long as you feel safe and you can protect your family, that's way more important. So anyway, this was a fun one, and well, I'm going to add one more thing here, is that what to do with the gold, that when you actually go and travel and you grab it and it's hyperinflation's over and the new booming economy is starting. So, for instance, the Greek banks during the economic crash of Greece, the European crisis, they already had, and I have to talk with actually people from Greece, but there was a Greek bank in Romania, which Piraeus, I don't know how to pronounce it, Piraeus, anyway, so they actually offered gold, not necessarily mortgages, but they would lend against gold. They sell gold, but you can keep the gold with them, and you could take a loan against that. Usually it was like you can take a loan up to 50% of the gold that you have, and then that would be secured by the loan. So somebody asked this question as well. I wanted to mix this in because once you have it and you're doing well and you're safe, there are opportunities to step legally, correctly into the new world as a very rich person, hopefully. And remember who helped you. But all I'm saying is that, there are ways to do this whole thing legally, safely, and you're gonna do well. Just know and hope for the best, because the Creator put you here for a reason, and hard times is usually to create strong men. So I hope you are one of them, or becoming one of them. Talk to you next time.